The manila envelope sitting on my doorstep that Tuesday morning in Phoenix, Arizona looked harmless enough, but it would turn out to be the most satisfying piece of mail I had ever received. I picked it up, noticing the return address was from the State Bar of Arizona, and my stomach did a little flip, because nothing good ever comes from official legal correspondence when you are in the middle of a brutal fight with your homeowners association. I had been battling the Sunset Palms HOA for 8 months now, ever since their president, Patricia Hendrickson, decided my drought-resistant desert landscaping violated some obscure covenant about maintaining traditional grass lawns. Never mind that Arizona was in the middle of a severe water crisis, and the city was literally paying homeowners to remove grass. Patricia and her lawyer, some guy named Richard Volkman, had filed 3 separate legal actions against me, racking up fines that now totaled nearly $18,000. I walked into my kitchen, tossed my keys on the counter, and tore open the envelope. The letter inside was addressed to homeowners in several Phoenix neighborhoods, and as I read the first paragraph, my hands started shaking. Not from fear this time, but from pure, unadulterated excitement. Richard Volkman's license to practice law had been suspended 6 months ago for misappropriating client funds and ethical violations. 6 months ago. That meant every single document he had filed against me, every motion, every legal threat, every fine notice bearing his signature was potentially invalid because he had been practicing law without a license. I read the letter 3 more times to make sure I was not hallucinating. The State Bar was notifying affected parties that they should review any legal matters handled by Volkman during the suspension period and consult with new legal counsel. They included a website with more details and a list of dates. I practically ran to my computer and pulled up the State Bar website. There it was in black and white. Richard Allen Volkman, license suspended effective September 15, 2025 for a period of 3 years. I checked my own records. His first filing against me. October 3, 2025. The foreclosure notice he had threatened me with last month. January 14, 2026. Every single action fell within his suspension period. I actually laughed out loud in my empty house. After months of stress, sleepless nights, and watching my savings drain away fighting these people, I finally had ammunition. My phone rang, and I saw it was my neighbor, Marcus Chen, who lived 3 houses down and had also been targeted by Patricia's reign of terror. His crime had been installing solar panels without pre-approval, even though state law explicitly protected homeowners' rights to install solar energy systems. Did you get the letter? Marcus asked before I could even say hello. I'm looking at it right now, I said, unable to keep the grin out of my voice. Marcus, do you understand what this means? Every fine, every legal action, all of it is garbage, Marcus said, and I could hear he was smiling too. I already called Tom Mitchell. He got the letter too. Tom was another victim of Patricia's tyranny, dinged for parking his work van in his own driveway overnight because it supposedly violated aesthetic standards. The 3 of us had formed an informal support group over the past few months, meeting at a local bar to commiserate and share strategies. We need to meet tonight, I said. I want to get a real lawyer involved and figure out exactly how to use this. We agreed to meet at 7 at the same sports bar we always used. I spent the rest of the day digging through every piece of paper the HOA had sent me, making copies, organizing everything chronologically. I also did something I had been putting off because of the cost. I called Daniel Reeves, an attorney who specialized in HOA disputes and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when homeowners had been wronged. His secretary put me through after I explained the situation, and Reeves himself picked up. "Mr. Volkman," he said, and I could hear the disdain in his voice. I've been waiting for this shoe to drop. He's been running around representing HOAs all over Phoenix while suspended. How many actions did he file against you? 3 major ones, plus about a dozen threatening letters and fine notices, I said. Bring everything to my office tomorrow at 9, Reeves said. Don't talk to the HOA, don't respond to anything they send, and definitely don't pay any fines. We're going to have some fun with this. The way he said fun made me feel hopeful for the first time in months. That evening, I met Marcus and Tom at the bar. Marcus brought his wife, Jennifer, who was a paralegal and had been helping us understand the legal documents. Tom brought a bottle of whiskey and 3 shot glasses. Gentlemen, Tom said, pouring 3 generous shots, I believe we are about to watch Karma do her beautiful work. We toasted and drank, then spread out all our documents on the table. Jennifer went through everything with a practiced eye, making notes on a legal pad. This is bigger than just invalid filings, she said after about 20 minutes. If the HOA board knew Volkman was suspended and kept using him anyway, that's fraud. Even if they didn't know, they're still liable for the actions taken in the HOA's name. You could potentially sue for malicious prosecution, abuse of process, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. How much are we talking? Marcus asked. Jennifer looked at her notes. Given the fines they've imposed, the stress, the potential damage to your credit if they actually tried to foreclose, and the legal fees you've all paid defending yourselves. Easily 6 figures each. Maybe more. I let that sink in. I had spent nearly $12,000 on legal fees and consultations, not counting the hours of work I had missed and the toll on my mental health. Patricia Hendrickson had made my life hell for the better part of a year, all because she did not like desert landscaping. What's the first move? Tom asked. We get a real lawyer, file to have all the actions dismissed, then we go on a fence, I said. Daniel Reeves tomorrow at 9. Can you 2 make it? They both nodded. The next morning, the 3 of us sat in Daniel Reeves' office in downtown Phoenix. His corner office had a view of the mountains, and the walls were lined with framed thank you letters from clients, and a few newspaper articles about major cases he had won. Reeves was in his mid-50s, with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that comes from winning a lot of courtroom battles. He listened to each of our stories, took notes, and reviewed every document we had brought. Gentlemen, I'm going to be straight with you, he said after about an hour. This is one of the most clear-cut cases of HOA misconduct I've seen in 20 years of practice. Volkman's suspension is a matter of public record. The HOA board had a fiduciary duty to ensure they were represented by licensed counsel. Either they knew and didn't care, or they were negligent in not checking. Either way, they're in serious trouble. What do we do first? I asked. First, we file motions to dismiss every action Volkman filed. Those should be granted immediately because he lacked authority to practice law. Second, we file a demand letter to the HOA board informing them of the situation and demanding they rescind all fines and fees. Third, assuming they don't immediately comply, we file suit against the HOA and the individual board members for fraud, negligence, and abuse of process. Individual board members, Marcus asked. Patricia Hendrickson, the treasurer, the secretary, everyone who signed off on hiring and continuing to use Volkman, Reeves said. We pierce the corporate veil and go after their personal assets. It's the only way to make sure this never happens again. Tom let out a low whistle. I like the way you think. My retainer is $10,000, Reeves said. But I'm willing to take this on contingency because I think we're going to win substantial damages. I'll cover the upfront costs, and I take 1/3 of whatever we recover. The 3 of us looked at each other. It was a no-brainer. Let's do it, I said, and Marcus and Tom nodded in agreement. We spent another hour going over strategy and signing representation agreements. Reeves said he would have the initial motions filed within 48 hours and the demand letter sent to the HOA board immediately. "One more thing," Reeves said as we were leaving. "Don't be surprised if Patricia and the board try to retaliate or intimidate you once they realize what's happening. Document everything. Every email, every conversation, every violation notice. It all becomes evidence." I went home feeling lighter than I had in months. For the first time since this nightmare started, I was not on defense. I was going on the attack, and I had the law on my side. 2 days later, Reeves called to tell me the motions had been filed. He had also sent the demand letter to the HOA board via certified mail and email. Now we waited. The response came faster than I expected. The next afternoon, I got home from work to find Patricia Hendrickson standing on my doorstep. She was in her early 50s, with blonde hair that looked like she spent more time at the salon than was healthy, and she wore the kind of outfit that screamed, "I want to speak to the manager." She had her phone in her hand, and I could tell she was agitated. "We need to talk," she said as I approached. "I'm represented by counsel now, Patricia," I said calmly. "Anything you need to say should go through my lawyer." "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're making a big deal out of nothing, so what if Richard had some administrative issues with his license?" The work he did was still valid. I actually had to stop myself from laughing. Administrative issues. Patricia, the man's license was suspended for stealing from clients. He wasn't allowed to practice law, which means everything he filed for the HOA is void, null, worthless. "The board is discussing options," she said, her voice tight. "We may be willing to reduce some of the fines if you drop this frivolous lawsuit." "There is no lawsuit yet," I said. "Just motions to dismiss all the invalid actions Volkman filed. But keep talking to me directly like this, and we'll add witness intimidation to the complaint when we do file." Her face went red. "This is my neighborhood too. I have every right to protect property values and maintain standards. You have rights as a homeowner, Patricia. But you don't have the right to make up rules, impose illegal fines, and hire suspended lawyers to harass people. Now please get off my property." She looked like she wanted to say more, but I pulled out my phone and started recording. "This is Patricia Hendrickson, HOA president, on my property attempting to discuss legal matters despite being told I'm represented by counsel. The date is March 24, 2026. Time is approximately 5:15 p.m. Patricia turned and stalked off, getting into her white Mercedes SUV and peeling out of my driveway. I immediately sent the video to Reeves with a text explaining what happened. He called me back in 5 minutes. Perfect. This shows consciousness of guilt and an attempt to interfere with your legal representation. I'm adding it to our file. That weekend, Marcus called to tell me he had also received a visit from Patricia, along with another board member named Susan Keller. They had tried the same tactic with him, offering to negotiate and suggesting he was being unreasonable. Marcus, following Reeves' advice, had also recorded the interaction. Tom reported that someone had left a formal violation notice on his door claiming his lawn was 1/4 inch too long, an obvious retaliatory move. He photographed the lawn with a ruler showing it was well within acceptable limits and sent that to Reeves too. "They're panicking," Reeves told us in a conference call on Monday. "Which means they've realized how much trouble they're in. The court hearing on the motions to dismiss is scheduled for April 8th. I expect the judge to grant them, and then we move to Phase 2. The next 2 weeks were tense. I kept expecting more retaliation, but the HOA went quiet. No new violation notices, no threatening letters, nothing. It was almost more unnerving than the constant harassment had been. On April 7th, the day before the hearing, Reeves called with unexpected news. "The HOA's new lawyer just contacted me," he said. "They want to settle." "What are they offering?" I asked. "Full dismissal of all fines and violations against all three of you, written apologies, and payment of your legal fees to date. Plus they're agreeing to terminate Patricia Hendrickson as president and remove her from the board entirely." It sounded almost too good to be true. "What's the catch?" "They want you to agree not to file the civil suit for damages. Basically, they want to make this go away before it becomes public and before we can start discovery on what the board knew and when they knew it." "What do you think?" I asked. "I think we can get more. The question is whether you want the money or you want to make sure this never happens to anyone else in your neighborhood again." I thought about it. The money would be nice, certainly. But I had spent 8 months living under Patricia's thumb, watching her abuse her tiny amount of power to make people miserable. How many other homeowners had she targeted over the years? How many had just paid the fines rather than fight? "I want to make sure this never happens again," I said. "What would that look like?" "We go to the hearing tomorrow, get the dismissals, then we file the civil suit. We demand a full accounting of every action Volkman took while suspended. We get access to HOA board meeting minutes, financial records, everything. We expose the whole pattern of abuse, and we get a judgment that puts real restrictions on what the board can do going forward. Plus damages for you three and potentially a class action for anyone else they've targeted." "Let's do it," I said. Reeves chuckled. "I was hoping you'd say that." "I'll inform their counsel we're declining the settlement offer." The hearing the next morning was almost anticlimactic. The three of us sat in the courtroom with Reeves while a young lawyer representing the HOA stood up and essentially admitted that, yes, Richard Volkman had filed all these actions while suspended, and yes, they should be dismissed. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s named Barbara Whitfield, looked thoroughly unimpressed. "Mr. Reeves, I'm granting your motions to dismiss all actions filed by Mr. Volkman on behalf of Sunset Palms HOA," she said. "Furthermore, I'm ordering the HOA to reimburse your clients for all fines paid during the period in question. Do your clients have additional claims pending?" "We'll be filing a civil complaint within the week, Your Honor," Reeves said. Judge Whitfield looked at the HOA's lawyer. "I suggest your clients take this very seriously, Counselor. This court does not look kindly on HOAs that abuse their authority or on attorneys who practice while suspended. You're dismissed." We walked out of the courthouse into the bright Phoenix sunshine, and I felt like I could breathe fully for the first time in months. "How long before we file the lawsuit?" Tom asked. "I'll have the complaint ready by Friday," Reeves said. "I'm going to name the HOA entity, Patricia Hendrickson individually, and the other board members who were in office during the relevant period. We're suing for abuse of process, malicious prosecution, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and fraud. I'm also going to ask for punitive damages and attorney's fees." "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" Marcus asked. "Discovery will take a few months. We'll depose Patricia and the board members, go through all the HOA records, and build our case. If they're smart, they'll settle once they see what we've got. If not, we go to trial probably early next year." The complaint was filed on April 11th, and we got copies via email. Reading it was deeply satisfying. Reeves had laid out the entire timeline of harassment, detailed every illegal fine and threat, and included the information about Volkman's suspension prominently. He was asking for $200,000 in damages for each of us, plus punitive damages and attorney's fees. The HOA had 30 days to respond, and we spent that time gathering more evidence. Reeves had filed discovery requests along with the complaint, demanding all HOA board meeting minutes, financial records, correspondence with Volkman, and records of any other homeowners who had been fined or threatened during the relevant period. What we got back was explosive. In early May, boxes of documents were delivered to Reeves' office. Marcus, Tom, and I met him there to go through them. Jennifer came too, since her paralegal skills were invaluable in organizing the mountain of paper. "Look at this," Jennifer said about an hour into our review. She held up a set of meeting minutes from August 2025. The board voted to hire Volkman, but look at this notation in the margin. I leaned over to read it. Someone had written in pen, "State bar status unclear, Susan to verify." Susan Keller, the treasurer, Marcus said. She was supposed to check if Volkman was in good standing. We found another document dated September 30, 2025, 2 weeks after Volkman's suspension had gone into effect. It was an email from Susan Keller to Patricia Hendrickson with the subject line, "Volkman license issue." The email was short. "Patricia, I checked the state bar website like you asked. Richard Volkman's license shows as suspended. Do we need to find new counsel?" Patricia's response, sent an hour later. "He says it's just a temporary administrative hold and will be resolved soon. His rates are good and he knows our community. Let's continue with him for now." "Oh, this is beautiful," Reeves said, reading over my shoulder. They knew. Patricia absolutely knew Volkman was suspended, and she made the decision to keep using him anyway. That's fraud, and it means her personal assets are absolutely in play. We kept digging. Over the next several hours, we found evidence of dozens of other homeowners who had been fined or threatened during the time Volkman was suspended. A man named Robert Hayes had been fined $8,000 for installing a basketball hoop. A woman named Linda Morrison had been threatened with foreclosure over a fence height dispute. An elderly couple, the Palmers, had been fined repeatedly for having bird feeders that supposedly attracted pests. "This is a class action," Reeves said. "We need to contact all these people." He filed an amended complaint the next week, adding 15 additional plaintiffs who had been targeted by the HOA while Volkman was suspended. Each had a similar story. Patricia Hendrickson had decided they were violating some rule, often a rule that was either non-existent or being interpreted in the most restrictive way possible. And Volkman had filed official-looking legal documents threatening them with fines, liens, or foreclosure. The amended complaint asked for over $3 million in damages. The HOA's response, when it finally came, was weak. Their new lawyer filed a motion to dismiss, arguing that the board members should not be held individually liable because they were acting in their official capacity. Reeves filed an opposition brief arguing that the corporate veil should be pierced because of the fraud and intentional misconduct. The hearing on that motion was scheduled for July 15th, but before we got there, something else happened. On June 3rd, I got a call from a detective with the Phoenix Police Department named Sarah Ortiz. She asked if I would be willing to come to the station to discuss Richard Volkman and the Sunset Palms HOA. "We've opened a criminal investigation into Mr. Volkman's activities while his license was suspended," Detective Ortiz explained when I arrived at the station. "Practicing law without a license is a crime in Arizona. We're also looking at potential fraud charges against the HOA board members who knowingly used him." I told her everything I knew and provided copies of all the documents we had uncovered. She was particularly interested in the email exchange showing Patricia had been told about the suspension, and decided to continue using Volkman anyway. "This establishes knowledge and intent," she said, making notes. "We're going to need to interview Miss Hendrickson and the other board members. I appreciate your cooperation." I called Reeves as soon as I left the station. He was thrilled. "A criminal investigation adds pressure," he said. "Even if they're not ultimately charged, the fact that police are looking into it makes settlement more likely. Nobody wants to risk criminal liability." He was right. 2 weeks later, the HOA's lawyer called requesting a settlement conference. We met at a neutral location, a conference room in a downtown office building, on June 24th. Patricia Hendrickson looked like she had aged 10 years in the past 2 months. She sat at the table with Susan Keller and another board member named Michael Torres, along with their attorney, a tired-looking man in his 40s named Glenn Roberts. Reeves had brought me, Marcus, and Tom. We also had Jennifer there to take notes. "Let's cut to the chase," Roberts said once we were all seated. "The board acknowledges that mistakes were made in the handling of these matters. They're prepared to offer a global settlement that includes full reimbursement of all fines and legal fees paid by the plaintiffs, plus a payment of $50,000 to be divided among the 18 named plaintiffs." Reeves did not even open his notebook. "That's insulting, and you know it. Your clients knowingly used a suspended lawyer to file fraudulent legal actions against homeowners for nearly 8 months. They imposed over $200,000 in illegal fines. They caused substantial emotional distress, damaged credit ratings, and in several cases nearly caused foreclosures. $50,000 doesn't even cover our documented damages, let alone punitive damages." "What's your number?" Roberts asked. $2.5 million allocated based on individual damages." Patricia Hendrickson resigns from the board immediately and is permanently banned from serving in any HOA leadership position. The board implements new policies requiring independent legal review of any fine over $500 and requiring verification of counsel's license status annually. "And your clients pay our attorney's fees," Patricia actually gasped. "That's insane. The HOA doesn't have that kind of money." "Then you'll have to assess the other homeowners," Reeves said calmly. "Or tap the reserve fund, or borrow it. But the alternative is we go to trial, we win an even larger judgment, and several of you may end up facing criminal charges. The police are very interested in those emails where you decided to keep using Volkman after being told he was suspended." "I was assured it was just an administrative matter," Patricia said, her voice shaking. "Then you're admitting you knew he was suspended when you continued to use him," Reeves said. "That's fraud, Miss Hendrickson. That's a felony." Roberts held up his hand. "Let's take a break. I need to consult with my clients." We went to separate rooms. Reeves bought us coffee from a machine in the hallway. "They're going to fold," he said. "Patricia's terrified of criminal charges, and the rest of the board is realizing their personal assets are at risk." He was right. When we reconvened 45 minutes later, Roberts had a new offer. $1.8 million plus resignation of Patricia Hendrickson plus policy changes plus attorney's fees, he said. "The board will need to get approval from their insurance carrier, but we believe this will be covered under the directors' and officers' policy." Reeves looked at me, Marcus, and Tom. We had discussed our bottom line before the meeting. We had agreed that anything over $1.5 million was acceptable if it included meaningful policy reforms and Patricia's permanent removal. "We need to caucus," Reeves said. In the hallway, the three of us talked it over quickly. "I say we take it," Tom said. $1.8 million is real money, and getting Patricia out is what really matters. Marcus nodded. "Agreed, and the policy changes will protect future homeowners." "I want one more thing," I said. "A public apology, not just to us, but posted on the HOA website and sent to every homeowner in the community. They need to admit what they did was wrong." Reeves smiled. "I can get that." When we went back in, Reeves laid out our acceptance terms. The $1.8 million, Patricia's resignation, the policy changes, attorney's fees, and a public apology to be drafted by our office and approved by us before publication. Roberts looked at his clients. Patricia was crying silently. Susan Keller looked defeated. Michael Torres just nodded. "We accept," Roberts said. The settlement agreement took another 3 weeks to finalize. There were details to work out about payment schedules, the exact wording of the policy changes, and the language of the apology. The HOA's insurance carrier balked initially at the amount, but Reeves provided them with the evidence we had gathered, and they agreed the HOA would almost certainly lose at trial and face an even larger judgment. On July 18th, we all met again to sign the final agreement. Patricia Hendrickson's resignation was effective immediately. The settlement money would be paid in 3 installments over 6 months, with the first payment due within 30 days. The public apology was posted on the HOA website on July 20th. It was everything I had hoped for. A full acknowledgement that the board had used a suspended lawyer, that the legal actions filed had been invalid, that fines had been improperly imposed, and that the behavior of the board during this period had been unacceptable. It named all 18 of us who had been targeted and apologized specifically for the harassment and stress we had endured. The first settlement check arrived on August 15th. My share, after attorney's fees and costs, was $78,000. Marcus got slightly more because his legal fees had been higher. Tom got about the same as me. The other 15 plaintiffs each received amounts ranging from $15,000 to $60,000, depending on their documented damages. But the money, satisfying as it was not really the point. What mattered was that Patricia Hendrickson was gone. The new HOA board, elected in an emergency meeting after Patricia's resignation, was made up of reasonable people who understood that an HOA was supposed to serve homeowners, not terrorize them. The policy changes went into effect immediately. No homeowner could be fined more than $500 without an independent legal review. All HOA legal counsel had to provide proof of their license status annually. Homeowners were given a formal right to appeal fines to a neutral arbitrator. And any board member found to have abused their position could be removed by a vote of the homeowners. In September, I received another call from Detective Ortiz. She told me that the district attorney's office had decided to charge Richard Volkman with multiple counts of unauthorized practice of law and fraud. Patricia Hendrickson and Susan Keller had been charged as co-conspirators for knowingly using Volkman while he was suspended. It'll probably end in plea deals, Detective Ortiz said. But they'll all have criminal records, and Volkman will likely face additional penalties from the state bar when his suspension ends. The criminal case moved forward through the fall. I followed it in the news when I could. Volkman pleaded guilty in November to 6 counts of practicing law without a license and 2 counts of fraud. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with 1 year suspended, meaning he would serve at least 12 months. Patricia Hendrickson and Susan Keller both accepted plea deals in December. They pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud and were sentenced to probation, community service, and ordered to pay restitution. They would not serve jail time, but they both now had felony convictions on their records. As for me, I used part of my settlement money to complete my desert landscaping project. I put in a beautiful mix of native plants, decorative rocks, and a small fountain. It looked amazing, used almost no water, and was completely drought-appropriate for Arizona. The new HOA board sent me a letter in January 2027, telling me my landscaping was lovely and asking if I would be willing to serve on a committee to help other homeowners transition to water-efficient yards. I politely declined the committee invitation, but I appreciated the sentiment. Marcus used his settlement money to expand his solar panel system and install a battery backup. Tom bought a new work van and parked it proudly in his driveway every night. The Palmers, the elderly couple who had been fined for bird feeders, put up even more bird feeders and sent us a card thanking us for fighting back. On a warm February evening, Marcus, Tom, and I met at our usual bar to celebrate the one-year anniversary of receiving that manila envelope from the state bar. We sat on the patio, drinking beer and watching the sun set over the Phoenix Mountains. "You know what the best part is," Tom said. "We could have just paid the fines. We could have ripped out the solar panels and the desert plants and the bird feeders and just gone along with Patricia's insanity." "But we didn't," Marcus said. "We stood up for ourselves and we made sure she couldn't do it to anyone else." I raised my beer, "to standing up to tyrants no matter how small their kingdom." We clinked bottles and drank. The evening was beautiful, my yard was beautiful, and my neighborhood was finally peaceful. Patricia Hendrickson's tiny reign of terror was over, brought down by her own arrogance and one suspended lawyer's greed. Sometimes, I thought about that moment when I opened the envelope and read about Volkmann's suspension. How close I had come to just giving up, paying the fines, and replacing my desert landscaping with water-hungry grass just to make the harassment stop. How many people over the years had done exactly that because they did not have the energy or resources to fight back? But I had fought back and I had won. Not just for me, but for Marcus and Tom and the Palmers and Linda Morrison and Robert Hayes, and all the other homeowners who had been targeted by an out-of-control HOA board that thought it was above the law. The new board was not perfect, but it was accountable. Homeowners actually showed up to meetings now, paying attention to what was being decided in their name. The culture had shifted from fear and compliance to engagement and community. In March, I ran into Susan Keller at the grocery store. She looked at me, looked away quickly, and turned down another aisle to avoid me. I felt a brief moment of pity for her. She had let herself be bullied by Patricia into going along with something she probably knew was wrong, and now she was paying the price. But mostly, I felt satisfied. Actions have consequences, even for HOA board members who think they are untouchable. I finished my shopping, drove home through my pleasant neighborhood where people were no longer afraid of arbitrary fines and harassment, and pulled into my driveway next to my beautiful desert landscaping. As I got out of my car, my neighbor across the street, a woman named Angela who had just moved in, waved at me. "I love your yard," she called. "I'm thinking of doing something similar. Any advice?" "Start with native plants," I called back. "And don't let anyone tell you it doesn't belong in Arizona." She laughed and waved again. I went inside, made dinner, and sat on my back patio as the sun went down, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. My phone buzzed with a text from Reeves. "Final settlement payment cleared. You're all set. Pleasure working with you." I texted back a thank you and leaned back in my chair. 8 months of hell, followed by 10 months of fighting back, and now it was really, truly over. The fines were gone, the legal threats were gone, Patricia was gone, and I had money in the bank and peace of mind. More importantly, the Sunset Palms HOA would never be able to terrorize homeowners the way it had before. The policy changes we had fought for were written into the governing documents now, approved by a vote of the homeowners. Any future board would have to follow those rules, or face the same kind of reckoning Patricia had faced. I thought about all the HOAs across America where similar abuses were probably happening right now. Board members drunk on tiny amounts of power, making life miserable for homeowners over petty disputes about grass height or paint colors or holiday decorations. Lawyers filing questionable legal actions, racking up fines and fees, threatening foreclosure over minor violations. I could not fix all of them, but I had fixed my own situation, and I had created a roadmap for others. Stand up, fight back, document everything, and do not be afraid to go after the people who abuse their authority. The next morning, I woke up to another email from Reeves. He had been contacted by a homeowner in Scottsdale, who was facing similar issues with his HOA and had heard about our case. The homeowner wanted to know if I would be willing to talk to him about my experience. I thought about it for a minute, then replied that I would be happy to help. Maybe that was my role now. The guy who fought the HOA and won, willing to share advice and encouragement with others facing the same battle. Over the following months, I heard from 7 different homeowners in various Phoenix suburbs. All of them were dealing with abusive HOAs, arbitrary fines, and legal threats. I shared my story, connected them with Reeves, and encouraged them to stand firm. 2 of those cases ended in quick settlements once the HOAs realized the homeowners were serious about fighting. 3 more were still working their way through the legal system. One homeowner discovered his HOA had been embezzling funds and reported it to the police. The last one actually got himself elected to his HOA board and was working to reform it from within. By the summer of 2027, our case had become something of a legend in Phoenix HOA circles. Lawyers who represented homeowners cited it in their cases. Real estate agents warned buyers about HOAs with histories of abuse. Local news had done a story about Patricia's conviction and the settlement. I never set out to be a crusader against HOAs. I just wanted to landscape my yard in a way that made sense for the Arizona desert. But sometimes, standing up for yourself in one situation creates ripples that go far beyond what you expected. On a hot July afternoon, I was working in my front yard, adding some new plants to fill in a bare spot, when a car pulled up, and a man I did not recognize got out. He was in his 30s, wearing jeans and a polo shirt, and he looked nervous. "Are you David?" he asked. I nodded, and he stuck out his hand. "I'm James Peterson. I live over in the Northgate community. I've been fighting my HOA for 6 months over a playground I built for my kids in my backyard. They say it violates covenants, but the covenants don't actually say anything about playgrounds." "What does their lawyer say?" I asked. "That's the thing," James said. "I looked up their lawyer on the state bar website after hearing about your case. His license is currently suspended for failing to pay dues and complete continuing education. I'm pretty sure everything he's filed against me is invalid, just like in your case." I actually started laughing. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," James said. "I've got the documentation. I just don't know what to do next." I wiped the dirt off my hands and gestured toward my house. "Come on inside. Let me get you Daniel Reeves' number. Sounds like you've got a case." As we walked toward my front door, past my thriving desert landscaping that had started this whole saga, I thought about Patricia Hendrickson sitting in her house somewhere in Phoenix, probably still bitter about what had happened, unable to comprehend that she had brought it all on herself. I thought about Richard Volkman, serving time in prison for his greed and dishonesty. I thought about all the homeowners who were no longer living in fear of arbitrary fines and harassment. And I thought about the manila envelope that had arrived on my doorstep that Tuesday morning, the one that had seemed so innocuous, but had turned out to be the key to everything. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places. Sometimes standing up to bullies means you get knocked down. But sometimes, if you are lucky and you are right and you refuse to give up, you win. And when you win against someone who has abused their power, when you hold them accountable and make sure they can never hurt anyone else the same way, that victory is sweet. I gave James Peterson the information he needed, watched him drive away with hope on his face, and went back to my gardening. My phone buzzed again with another email, this time from a homeowner in Temp with yet another suspended lawyer story. I smiled, made a note to call him later, and went back to my plants. The desert sun was hot, my yard was beautiful, and my neighborhood was finally at peace. It had been a long fight, but it had been worth every minute.